Kalimera. My name is Andreas Borgeas. I am a member of the California State Senate, and I'd like to begin, if I may, with an apology for my dress. And if Lufthansa, by chance, is listening to this podcast, can somebody get my luggage to Cyprus? It'd be really helpful. Anyways, folks, I'd like to express my appreciation to the Economist, distinguished guests, and those attending this section on the Eastern Mediterranean amidst geopolitical upheaval. We are painfully aware how our geopolitical landscape has changed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. No doubt our security and energy calculations are being forced into expedited evolutions. Yet how these evolutions will materialize remains very much in a state of play. The purpose of my brief presentation is to identify select points I believe European policymakers should consider in evaluating energy proposals in the Mediterranean, which range, of course, from traditional pipelines to a variety of alternative energy networks. But I submit to you that given Europe's energy and security circumstances, that electrical interconnection represents a promising set of practical opportunities between North Africa, Cyprus, Greece, and Europe to service clean energy demands. Clearly, policymakers have sharply renewed their interest in the Mediterranean. The U.S. has reasserted its commitment to transatlantic partnerships, and a newfound purpose exists in the corridors of Brussels, Washington, and the Mediterranean capitals. One such project gaining attention is energy interconnections between Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt, whereby green electricity generated in Egypt can be transmitted underwater into Greece's electrical grid, extending energy service throughout the Balkans and Eastern Europe. Interconnection will effectuate the Paris Climate Accords, and given the events in Ukraine, is of heightened geopolitical importance to Western nations. In this fashion, the Mediterranean can play a vital role as a new energy network towards Europe's energy independence. In fact, when Prime Minister Mitsotakis addressed a joint session in the U.S. Congress, he indicated his plan was to interconnect Greek electrical grids, not just with Cyprus and Israel, but also Egypt, as it will serve as an important link to the Balkans and Eastern Europe. But my question to you, which criteria should European policymakers be evaluating energy proposals in the Mediterranean? I respectfully submit to you the following 4 points, which bear on vital security interests, adversarial party exclusion, compliance with international law, and the need for expedited regulatory approval. So first, a Greece-Africa interconnection is in Europe's security interests. The Atlantic Council, many of you may know, is a prominent transatlantic think tank in Washington, and it recently issued an in-depth study on this very topic. The report indicates there is now an alignment of interests and priorities between Greece, Cyprus, and Europe in the energy space. Interconnection will not only serve climate objectives, but will also service important energy corridors to wean Europe off Russian reliance, all of which, of course, are in the interests of the EU. But secondly, certain entities should be precluded from such projects. And repeat that, certain entities need to be precluded. It is in the best interest of Europe and the U.S. to prevent entities affiliated or closely cooperative with foreign adversaries from having a stake in interconnection projects. Our common security interests are best served through transatlantic cooperation and protecting investment in critical infrastructure from potentially adversarial parties, as well as domestic proxies. Substantial information exists in the public domain, I don't need to get into it, and that there are companies closely affiliated with Russia and state-owned and state-controlled enterprise. Therefore, there should be transparent, competitive, and scientifically sound processes that allow Europeans, Africans, and Americans entities to fairly compete for equity involvement in the projects, but that it's in everyone's interest to preclude entities potentially influenced by Russia from being involved on international security grounds. Thirdly, the project should be consistent with international law. I'm actually an international law professor. The fact that I'm even having to mention this is baffling, but the world and its paradigms have dramatically shifted in the last number of months. The international rules-based system is experiencing unprecedented challenges. Therefore, any proposed transmission line should be consistent with the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. Now, I'm an American. We haven't even signed this. But more evolved nations certainly have, and that is why I believe this is a document and a set of conventions that we need to abide by. An interconnection project should be consistent also with the exclusive economic zone pursuant to the 2020 agreement between Greece and Egypt. This agreement is an important legal declaration that codifies maritime boundaries and gives legal effect to party intentions. Therefore, any such proposal should comply with international law and be consistent with the policies of the respective countries. Finally, political support should be limited to projects in the most advanced stages of regulatory approval. As a Californian, I have a special soft spot in understanding how burdensome and cumbersome Brussels' regulatory process can be, because we probably have our own respective monstrosity. But multilateral infrastructure projects of this nature are complicated. They are bureaucratic and they are prone to delays. Therefore, years of regulatory review could be reduced by supporting projects that have already been included in the EU's National Development Plan. Competitive projects should achieve high rankings by regulatory authorities in the EU's Electricity Infrastructure Plan, as well as be candidates by the European Commission as projects of common interest. To pursue projects outside of advanced regulatory approval is to invite critical project delays, benefiting Russia, potentially putting at risk our strategic interests. In conclusion, no doubt there are many compelling criteria for policymakers to consider, but the points I'm submitting to you today should be part of the consideration. That Europe should look upon interconnection as a strategic priority, that such critical infrastructure necessarily exclude Russian influence and proxies, that such a project be consistent with international law, and that whichever projects are most advanced in the respective regulatory process should be preferred given the acuity of our needs. Finally, we need all the Mediterranean players to support an open, competitive, and scientifically sound process to help the Mediterranean become a true energy network, for which interconnection is proving to be a vital part. Thank you.